Close relationships are critical to us, not just our survival, but also our well-being and health, and this is evidenced in countless studies. Such relationships are also particularly valuable to manage all kinds of crises and external insecurities. In this study, we have looked at 313 people in romantic relationships. Participants came from Spain, Austria, Poland, and Czech Republic, and they completed weekly questionnaires over the course of the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic during the very first European lockdowns. We wanted to identify factors that contribute to having and maintaining a high relationship quality throughout this crisis. To do so, we looked at several variables. First, attachment style. Attachment style originated as an ethological concept to describe children's reactions to stressful situations. But there's also much research on adult attachment. We know that it influences romantic relationships, and we know that attachment patterns are activated upon stress, even in adults. Another important, actually often defining component of romantic relationships is sexual activity and satisfaction. This has previously been linked to romantic relationship quality, but its role is actually omitted in many studies on this topic. We also surveyed other variables with regard to the relationship itself, but also variables that assess the influence of the lockdown on the participants' lives. We also included macro-level environmental variables here. As you can see, there were pronounced differences between the countries which allowed us to dissociate the influence of these variables from other country-specific factors over time. In our quest for determinants of relationship quality, we employ linear and nonlinear models which very reliably learn to predict the best predictors of a given target variable. So what we find is that first, the linear models do learn to predict relationship quality very well. Indeed, so well that on average they predict around 30% of the variance in the variable relationship quality, and that in novel pools of participants. So participants these models never saw before. The non-linear models on average perform a bit worse with only 22% predicted variance. The most influential predictors of relationship quality were attachment style first of all, then came amount of conflicts, and interestingly also age, so younger participants tended to be more satisfied with their relationships. Not in line with our hypothesis, sexual behavior did not really aid this prediction, nor did measures of impact of the lockdown or other environmental variables. In this pic you can see how this most important predictor attachment was used by the models that were not confined to linearity to predict the target relationship quality. You can see that's quite an interesting relationship here. Predicting changes in relationships was much harder, and the models were not significantly better than the so-called trivial predictor, which just always predicts the most common value. Interestingly, there were similar results in other large-scale studies, so apparently it's just very hard to predict 7 weeks into the future, and we haven't found good enough self-report values for that yet. So to wrap up, we show here that attachment style but also agreement are major predictors of a high relationship quality in the extraordinary times during the very first curfews in Europe. So if you have a secure relationship, you don't really need to worry about external crises and environmental factors. However, we also have to conclude that predicting changes in quality is much, much harder. And now for a very big thank you to the very cool international team that made these huge efforts happen. Do check out our project on OSF as well as Jakob Binter's talk right here. I'm very sorry that this year we will not meet in person, but I'm already very much looking forward to seeing you all digitally. And of course, I'd be very happy to discuss these findings. See you soon.